Welcome to the Deep Dive the Learner. Today, we're venturing into some materials focused on something we all experience, those, tricky negative emotions like sadness, anger, anxiety.
Mm,
You shared some really useful English language learning resources with us, including a dialogue and some key vocabulary breakdowns.
right.
Our mission on this deep dive is to pull out the most helpful, insightful ways for you to talk about these feelings naturally without getting bogged down in like formal dictionary definitions.
Exactly. We're aiming to equip you with practical, everyday language to navigate these emotional landscapes.
Have you ever felt the learner kind of at a loss for words when you're trying to express that you're just not feeling yourself?
Yeah.
Or maybe when you notice someone around you is clearly having a tough time? Well, this is exactly what we're diving into. We want to give you a richer, more natural vocabulary to handle these common human experiences. So let's get started.
Okay. So our source material kicks off by painting a picture of general negative moods. He uses phrases like, not really in the best mood, kind of sad.
Kind of nervous and not feeling very well. It even connects these feelings to like a cloudy day and the blues,
The blues, yeah.
suggesting that sort of low spirits or melancholy feeling.
Right. It's that kind of everyday language you might use just to signal that things aren't quite right. And then the learner, the source material, introduces some specific vocabulary. The first one is down.
Hmm.
Now, you probably already know this is the opposite of up, but it's also a really common and, well, approachable way to say sad. We see examples like, I'm feeling down, I'm a bit down today,
Right.
and that really empathetic question, you look really down. Are you okay?
What's interesting about down, I think, is its commonality. It feels like a less intense way to express sadness.
Yeah.
Maybe it reflects a cultural tendency sometimes to avoid stronger, more overt expressions of negativity. It's easily understood, relatable, makes it a go-to when you want to convey mild sadness without sounding overly dramatic.
That makes sense. And then we have grouchy. Oh, think of Oscar the Grouch, instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
Huh. So grouchy isn't like full-on anger, but it's definitely not happy.
Yeah.
It describes someone in a bad mood, someone who isn't being very nice. The source emphasizes that grouchiness is more about a general unhappiness that, well, it manifests in unpleasant behavior.
That Sesame Street reference is a brilliant shortcut to understanding, isn't it?
Totally.
You immediately get a sense of someone who's generally dissatisfied, maybe prone to complaining. It helps distinguish grouchy from just quiet unhappiness or,
Yeah.
explosive anger.
Okay, so we're starting to build a vocabulary for those general feelings of being off. Now, the learner, the source material, presents a dialogue. It's between two friends, Carrie and a friend, and this really brings these feelings into a relationship context.
Exactly. Carrie mentions feeling a bit down after a phone call with her boyfriend.
Hmm.
And through their conversation, we get this picture of his negative moods. He's described as always getting upset and losing his temper over nothing.
And generally being hard to talk to. This gives us more concrete examples of how negative emotions can, surface in someone's behavior
Yeah.
and affect those around them.
And her friend immediately tries to find a reason for his mood, right? Suggesting he might be stressed out from working because he has a pretty nerve-wracking job.
Yeah.
It's interesting how we often look for those external explanations for someone's emotional state, isn't it?
It really highlights that common human tendency, I think, to seek causes for behavior.
Mm-hmm.
We often look at external pressures like work as potential triggers for internal emotional states.
But Carrie points out that he's always in a really foul mood. And when she tries to connect with him, he shuts down and brushes me off. Those phrases, shuts down and brushes me off. They really paint a picture of his way of dealing with things
Mm-hmm.
and how isolating that can be in a relationship.
Shuts down. It's just a withdrawal, right? An unwillingness to engage or communicate emotionally.
Exactly.
And brushes me off implies a dismissal of her attempts to connect, almost like her feelings or concerns aren't important. These can be, well, common protective mechanisms when someone feels overwhelmed or just doesn't know how to process their negative emotions constructively.
Then Carrie's friend offers a pretty broad generalization saying, men are like that, can feel nervous, anxious, or on edge, and the only way they can express it is by trying to hide it through aggressiveness.
Hmm.
Now, while this is a generalization and it might not ring true for everyone the learner, it does bring up an interesting point about different ways people might express or maybe mask negative feelings.
That raises a significant point about societal expectations around emotional expression. Definitely. While it is a generalization, it touches on a common stereotype or observation about how some individuals might perhaps present defensiveness or aggression as a way of concealing underlying feelings of vulnerability, anxiety, or being on edge.
Carrie also mentions that he wasn't always as grouchy, which is often a really important clue, isn't it? That something might have changed in someone's life or well-being.
Precisely. A noticeable shift in someone's typical demeanor can be a key indicator that they might be struggling with something, and, well, it warrants closer attention, maybe.
And her friend's advice, well, it goes from the supportive talk to him, try to cheer him up when he's down,
Right.
to the, shall we say, more direct, get rid of him and get a new one,
Huh. Yes.
which leads to Carrie's very relatable and slightly amused response, "You are something else you know."
That last line is fascinating, isn't it, in its ambiguity.
It really is.
It can express disbelief, mild shock, or even a slightly exasperated affection, depending entirely on the tone.
Yeah.
In this context, it seems to be Carrie's way of acknowledging the somewhat extreme nature of her friend's advice, while maybe still appreciating the sentiment behind it.
Exactly. Context really is key, isn't it? Okay, so the dialogue gives us a real-world context for these feelings and the language we use around them. Now let's delve deeper into some of the specific emotions and their nuances, as highlighted in the language takeaway section for you, the learner.
Okay, the first one is stressed out. This is such a prevalent phrase in modern English, isn't it?
Yeah.
The source defines it as that feeling you get when you have too much stuff to do, giving examples like schoolwork deadlines, job pressures.
Mm-hmm.
It also points out how much more common stressed out is in spoken English compared to just stressed. The addition of out really seems to amplify the feeling, doesn't it?
It does.
Suggests a state of being completely overwhelmed by stress.
Absolutely. You hear stressed out all the time. It almost conveys a sense of being completely consumed by pressure, more so than just saying, "I'm stressed."
Then we encounter nerve-wracking. This is a great descriptive term.
It is.
The source explains it as something that racks our nerves, making us very tense, very anxious, very uncomfortable, essentially very nervous.
Yeah.
And the examples they provide are so vivid. Suspense movies, roller coasters.
Oh, roller coasters, definitely.
And that universally dreaded nerve-wracking presentation with the shaky hands and the slides that won't load. You can almost feel that anxiety just thinking about it. These kinds of concrete examples really help you connect with the physical and emotional sensations associated with something nerve-wracking.
Definitely. That presentation scenario is something so many people can relate to, that feeling of being on the spot and the fear of things going wrong. And the last in this trio is on edge,
Right.
which is described as being easily angered. The example of someone who has recently quit smoking is spot on that heightened irritability and sensitivity to even small things. On edge really captures that feeling of being constantly reactive, like you're just about to snap.
On edge describes a state of heightened tension, where your threshold for irritation is just much lower. Even minor things can trigger a disproportionately negative reaction.
Okay, so we've explored some initial feelings, seen how they play out in a conversation, and zoomed in on some key emotional vocabulary. Now, the learner, let's move on to our fluency builder and look at some really useful related idioms.
First up is lose your temper. This one is fairly straightforward. It means to become angry.
Right.
And we get some personal examples from the source. One person mentions a dirty house or like a dirty room as something that makes them lose their temper. Well, the other cites drilling construction and the repetitive tap, tap, tap or stomping feet. It's quite telling how different seemingly small things can be triggers for different people, isn't it?
It really is. For me, clutter and disorganization can definitely get under my skin. It creates this feeling of chaos that can make me really, well, not lose my temper, but definitely feel stressed and irritable.
And those persistent, often unpredictable noises can be incredibly grating. It's that cumulative effect of annoyance, I think, that can eventually lead to someone losing their temper.
Exactly. It's not always about the big, dramatic things. Then we have brush someone off. This is a very useful phrase for describing that act of ignoring someone, or subtly, or maybe directly, telling them to go away, essentially avoiding their company. The example given of offering to see a movie and then just walking away perfectly illustrates that dismissive behavior, doesn't it?
It really does. It conveys a sense of casual dismissal, almost as if the other person's presence or request is insignificant. It can be quite hurtful because it sort of invalidates their attempt to connect.
Yeah, brush off carries that sense of making someone feel unimportant or like not worthy of attention.
Right, that feeling of not being heard or valued. Now, on a more positive note, we have cheer someone up,
Ah,
which is all
yes.
about making someone happier, the direct opposite of feeling down. The
Mm,
connection to cheerleader is a nice visual way to remember the positive energy involved.
that's true.
And we get some personal examples of what cheers up the hosts in the source,
Mm-hmm.
going for a drink, popcorn,
Like
chocolate,
chocolate always works. Yeah.
and even organizing books. It's interesting how the things that lift our spirits can be so personal.
It really highlights the individual nature of comfort and joy, doesn't it? What one person finds cheering, another might not even notice.
Like exactly.
It could be a sensory pleasure like chocolate, a social activity, or even, yeah, a way to restore order when feeling emotionally out of sorts, like organizing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For me, as I mentioned, bringing order to chaos can be really therapeutic, especially when I'm feeling stressed or down. It's like regaining a sense of control somehow.
And then we come to the slightly more enigmatic phrase, you are something else you know.
I guess.
The source explains that this basically means I can't believe you, and it can express disbelief. But what's crucial to understand, the learner, is that it can be positive, like in the dialogue where it's a slightly teasing compliment,
Right.
or it can be negative, like in response to betrayal or something shocking. Context and tone of voice are absolutely everything with this one.
That's a critical takeaway. The same words, delivered with a different tone or in a different situation, can have vastly different meanings. The dialogue provides a perfect example of that positive, slightly humorous use of the phrase.
You really have to pay attention to the subtle cues, don't you? Okay, so we've covered quite a bit of vocabulary and seen how these emotions play out in conversation. Now let's get a little more personal with some reflections on these feelings from the source material.
Okay. The source expert shares that they tend to be grouchy before 9 a.m., identifying as definitely not a morning person.
Uh-huh, I can relate.
They also mention not losing their temper frequently, but getting easily frustrated by things like repetitive tapping, the sound of people eating with their mouths open,
Oh, that's a big one for many people.
and nail biting. It's often those small, seemingly insignificant habits of others that can be surprisingly irritating, isn't it?
It really is. As I mentioned earlier, for me, lying is something that makes me really lose my temper, or, as the source also puts it, blow my top. On the other hand, organizing things is definitely what cheers me up. It's funny how we all have our own specific triggers and comforts.
And the source expert finds that shopping, particularly for others or for the house, can be a mood booster. It highlights how engaging in activities focused on others or, improving our immediate environment can positively impact our emotional state.
It's all so individual, isn't it? What grinds one person's gears might be completely unnoticed by another.
Precisely. Our emotional triggers and our preferred coping mechanisms are often deeply personal and can vary greatly from person to person.
Okay, the learner, before we wrap up this deep dive, let's do a quick fire vocabulary review to really solidify some of these key terms for you.
Absolutely. Let's do it. We have down, meaning feeling sad or unhappy. Example.
Mm.
He's been feeling down since he didn't get the job.
Then there's have the blues, which means having sad feelings or emotions. For instance, the rainy weather always gives me the blues.
Stressed out, that feeling of being very worried or anxious. Example. She's totally stressed out about her exams.
Next up is nerve-wracking, something that causes a person to feel very nervous. Like giving presentations is always nerve-wracking for me.
Brush me off, meaning to refuse to talk about something with someone. Example. I tried to ask him about it, but he just brushed me off.
We also had pissed off, which means upset or very angry, a bit informal but common. For example, he was really pissed off when they canceled his flight.
And finally, cheer up, to make someone happier. As in, I tried to cheer up with some good news.
And a bonus one that came up in our personal reflections, grinds my gears, meaning something that makes me angry or upsets me. Example, people talking loudly on their phones in public really grinds my gears.
That's a great recap of some really practical vocabulary for talking about those negative emotions you might encounter or experience. The learner.
All right, the learner. So to sum up this deep dive, you now have, hopefully, a much richer set of words and phrases to describe feelings of sadness, anxiety, and anger. You've seen how these emotions can play out in everyday conversations, and you even have some useful idioms to express related ideas, like losing your temper or cheering someone up.
We hope this exploration has given you some really practical and memorable ways to understand and talk about these universal human experiences, whether you're trying to articulate your own feelings in English or empathize with someone else.
And for a final thought to consider, the learner. Think about how different cultures might influence the way these emotions are expressed and understood. Are there subtle nuances in what it means to feel down in one part of the world compared to another? This is just the beginning. There's a whole fascinating world of emotional expression out there waiting for you to explore further. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.